Hey everybody, welcome to Bill Sky, the Linux guy, and in this video today we're going to talk about user management. What is it that you have to do to manage the users on your Linux? Now, if you're just using Linux as a development tool, that's fine. I totally understand. It's a great development operating system, or operating system for developers, I should say. But it's also an unbelievably powerful multi-user operating system that you can set up as a server. I mean, I have a little server over here, one of my little servers over here in the corner that's an Intel NUC computer, and it has Linux on it. It's had Linux on it for over 10 years. I rarely have to reboot it. I can log into it. I share files with it. I provide my website. It's an unbelievably secure and unbelievably versatile operating system. So it's not just something that you use for development, it's something you use for serving up cloud services and all that. So one of the things about having a multi-user operating system is being able to manage users, creating users, desktop users, administrative users, users with special capabilities. So all that is part of it, and it's something that you need to learn. So let's get right to it. So I have Alma Linux here, and this is basically a Red Hat Linux. It's an open source Linux. I've actually just started using it over the last few weeks, and I actually really like it. It's a lot like CentOS. It's a lot like Fedora. It's not quite as verbose as Fedora is, but it is a very good operating system. And all of, so far that I've seen, and all of the commands we're going to talk about today are pretty much compatible across all of those Red Hat type Linuxes, as well as the Debian Linuxes like Ubuntu, Mint, and so forth. So let's talk about users. When you log into your computer, you're asked to log in as a user. And I'll go ahead and log off here. I'm not powering off, I'm just logging off. And the background you're seeing is my Mac, because I'm running Alma Linux in a VMware guest. And you can see that right now the only users that are set up for this Alma Linux is Linux user. Now, whether you know it or not, there's also a root user, and you might want to look at my previous video on what a super user is. But there's also a root user which you should never log in as. You should always log in as a desktop user that might have super user capabilities. So I'm going to go ahead and just log in. And on all of my VMware guest operating systems, I always name the user Linux user. Now, one thing I find very interesting here is that I did change the resolution, and I don't know why Alma didn't take that permanently. Maybe because I didn't shut down, I don't know. But let's go ahead and set it back up. Okay. All right, so how can you see the users in your Linux operating system? Well, I'm going to go up here to activities, and I'm just going to type user, and you can see users, add or remove users. I'm going to click on that, and every desktop operating or every desktop GUI, graphical user interface, is a little bit different. This one is quite a bit different, I think, than Mint Linux, but it's a lot the same as Ubuntu. So the first thing it says is that you can do things with your own ID, but you can't do things with other users because you've loaded the user's app, but you haven't actually logged in as a super user. So I'm going to click on this unlock, and it asks me to type in my password. And because I'm a super user, again, look at my previous video on super users, I now can add users, I can change users, and things like that. So let's go ahead and add a user. Why not? So I'm going to click on add user, and I'm going to give the user a name. I don't know, Tammy Taylor. And the username and the full name are two different things. The full name is what's displayed on the screen. It's more of a friendly, human-like name. But the username is actually the name that is saved on the computer and the home directory. Now, what in the world is the home directory? Well, I'm going to go to activities, and I'm going to click on the files app, and I'm going to go to home. Actually, no, I'm going to go to other locations, the computer's hard drive, and there's a home folder. This is the user ID. Linux user is my user ID. Even though the name might be Linux space user, it's Linux user. So when I create this in the home folder, and every operating system has that type of a setup these days, the name of the directory that's going to contain all the user files is Tammy Taylor. Now you can set it up in this case, allow the user to set a password when they next log in, or set a password now. I normally like setting a password initially for users and then tell them the first time they log in they have to change it. The other thing I can do is I can make this an administrative user. Now, an administrative user means that they can do the sudo command, the super user do command, and we're just going to leave this as a standard for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and set a password. And notice on this particular app, I just typed in the word password, and it won't let me confirm it. So I'm going to put a $sign right after it, and it still isn't letting me set it up because the policy for this password setup is that you can't use common words. Stop. So one of the things that you can do as an administrator is that you can turn that feature off. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to open up a terminal and I'm going to do a change directory to etc security. Now this is Alma Linux. Every Linux is a little bit different. And there's an awful lot in here, but there's also that blue one on the top right, passwordquality.config. There's a pwquality.config, and there's also a pwquality.config.d. And there's actually nothing in there, so we're just going to do a and I'm going to do a search for dict check, and that's a dictionary check. By default, that is enabled. If you go ahead and uncomment that line and make it equal to 0, then that means it won't check the dictionary. There might also be another one for common. Oh. Yep, there's a minimum length right here. There's a maximum length, things like that. But we're not actually there quite yet, but I did want to show you that you can change those. So what we're going to do is I have to put a password here. Now, if I'm not in the GUI, I can do this much easier. But I don't know, P1A. So I put a P1, P the number 1. And unfortunately, this GUI doesn't really show you the password. It's a little bit difficult. It doesn't look like that they match. Yeah, they don't match. So you kind of have to you almost have to write it down somewhere. So now they're both set up there. Let's do this with the command line. I think the command line is a lot easier, and you'll see what I mean by that. So I'm going to cancel out of this and close my GUI. And I'm going to bring up a terminal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a sudo, because I'm a super user, sudo useradd -m. And I'm going to call it, I don't know, Tammy Fields. And there, that's it. So the user has been set up. The -m means create the ID and the home folder. If I didn't want to create a home folder, I would say -M. If I do an ls on home, you can see now Tammy Fields is there. It's a little hard to see with these colors, but you can see that Tammy Fields is there. So now Tammy Fields doesn't have a password, so we have to add a password. So I'm going to say sudo password Tammy Fields, and we're going to give her just a very simple password, and it took it okay. So now I'm going to switch user to Tammy Fields, type in my password for Tammy Fields, and there I am. I'm logged in as Tammy Fields. So much easier than the GUI. Just another example of how the terminal commands can be much easier. Now, what if you want to find information out about a user? So I'm going to say ID Tammy Fields, and a number of things you can see here. Tammy Fields has a user ID, that's a numeric value that the Linux uses to identify that user, of 1001. Now most of the time you won't ever have to deal with that, but it's there. Tammy Fields also has a group named Tammy Fields associated with it. So by default, when you create an ID on most Linuxes these days, it also creates a group ID with the same exact name. So if you want people to be able to view your files, you just have to add them to your group. It's actually very, very nice. And the group numeric group ID in this case is also 1001. And I'll be honest here. I'm not really sure what the group S is, but I'll find that out and put it in the video notes. I've just never really used that very often. So that's the ID statement. And we already did the password, so we set the password. Now, if I want to change my own password, I don't have to say sudo password. All I have to do is just say password. And now I can change my password. Okay, I changed it to the same one. It gave me an error, but that's okay. I really didn't want to change my password. Okay, so that's creating a user ID. That's creating a password for the user ID. Let's go ahead and delete that user ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say userdel Tammy Fields. So if I want to delete Tammy Fields, I just say userdel Tammy Fields. Now, here's the thing though. If I do that, Tammy Fields folders are still going to be there. They're still going to be under the home directory. So if I want to actually delete the folders as well, I'm going to say -r Tammy Fields. Oh, and I didn't do it as sudo. And now if I do an ls on home, you can see that Tammy Fields is gone. All of Tammy Fields' folders are gone. Their home folder is gone, and so forth. So let's go ahead and recreate Tammy Fields. Let's set their password. Okay. And now let's say that I want to lock Tammy Fields' ID, so they're not allowed to log in anymore. Why would you do that? Well, you have a user that you've set up. The user's doing some obnoxious things. They might be trying to log in securely as root when they're not given access to it. So you want to lock them just in case they might guess a password, which they shouldn't, but they might. So to lock a user ID, I'm just going to say sudo usermod. Actually, before we do that, let's try to switch to Tammy Fields, make sure I made it again correctly. Okay, so I have my home folder there. All right, so I'm logged in. Now I'm going to exit out of Tammy Fields, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock them. So I'm going to say usermod expire date 1 Tammy Fields. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying that I want the date, I want to expire that account now. Okay, I want it, it needs to be expired right now. So, oh, what did I do? Forgot to do the sudo. There we go. So now if I try to switch user Tammy Fields and put in the name, it says your account has expired. Please contact your system administrator. Okay, so let's say I want to unexpire it. I'll put a -1 there. Now if I try to go in, I can now log in. So, you know, if you know these commands, you can get to this stuff. You can get it done so quickly. Okay, so let's say I want to next list all of the groups on the computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type groups, and you can see that there's Linux, user, and wheel. Now, where's Tammy Fields? Where's the Tammy Fields group? Well, the problem is I didn't execute that as sudo. So if I execute it, now what groups does is it shows what groups your user ID is in. It doesn't list all of the groups on the system. It just shows the groups their user ID is in. So when I said sudo groups, it showed all of the groups that the root user ID was in because I'm executing the groups command as the super user. If I want to just list all of the groups, I'm going to say sudo less and here's all of the groups. This is all of the groups in the computer, and it's a very large set. I can move up and down so you can see. Let's see if we can find Tammy here. Yep, there's Tammy Fields down here on the bottom. Tammy Fields is there. Linux user will be somewhere up here as well. And I'm going to press the Q key to get out of that less. So less is an app that actually lets you scroll through a file, and the etc directory, the group file within the etc directory, contains a list of all of the groups. Okay? Another thing you can do is I can say ID Tammy Fields, and it shows Tammy Fields group name, their user ID. I could do, let's try this, ID-NG. You get a little bit different of a display. So Tammy Fields is inside of the Tammy Fields group. Now what the -NG does, it says don't show me their user ID, don't show me their numeric codes, just show me the group name. So I use that -NG quite a bit. So let's say if I want to create another group. So just like I did with a user ID, I can create a group. I can say sudo group add, I don't know, guest users. And now guest users is loaded. Let's say I want to add Tammy Fields to the guest users group. So I would say sudo usermod-a-g guest users Tammy Fields. And now Tammy Fields is a group, is part of the guest users group. Let's do that NG, and you can see now that Tammy Fields both belongs to the Tammy Fields group as well as the guest users. What good is this? Well, let's say you create a group for a department that's working on a special project and you want other people to be able to see your files. Well, what you can do is you can create a group for that project and you can assign all the people that should have access to the files to that group. Pretty cool. It's pretty neat that you can do that. Okay, so we created a user, we created a group, we added Tammy Fields to that group. Let's go ahead and remove Tammy Fields from that group. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to say sudo del user Tammy Fields guest users. Oh, and what did I do here? Oh, I think I am. Yeah, I used the wrong command. The del user is for Ubuntu, operating system. So I'm going to say sudo usermod-g guest users Tammy Fields. And that removes Tammy Fields from that group. And if I look at all of the groups that Tammy Fields, oh, wait, what happened? So this command on Red Hat is kind of interesting because you don't specify the group that you want to remove them from. You specify the group that you want them to be a part of only. So yeah, it's a little bit weird. So I'm going to say sudo, and let's just say that Tammy Fields should only be part of the Tammy Fields group. Now Tammy Fields is only part of the Tammy Fields group. I'm not crazy about that command because you have to do special things to be put into one group and moved into others or copied into others. But that's how you can do it. That's one of the ways that you can do it. Let's go ahead and put Tammy Fields back into that group. Let's take a look at, okay, so Tammy Fields is part of that group, guest users. So there's another command called gpasswd Tammy Fields, and let's say guest users. And it actually says it's removing it from guest users. So now when we look at Tammy Fields, they're only part of the Tammy Fields group. So now let's go ahead, now that we've taken Tammy Fields out of the guest users group, we don't need that group anymore. I'm going to say sudo group del guest users. And now let's go ahead and take a look at, to make sure that that group is gone. And I don't know if you can see, I think it was guest. Yep. Slash the string, I did this, I said slash guest users, and it couldn't find that in the file using less. So that's how you can add additional how you can add additional users. So we added groups, we added users, we added groups, we assigned a user to a group. Now, one thing that we didn't do in this video is that we did not add a user to a supergroup. And take a look at my previous video about that. I show you how to do that. I show you how to set up that user as a super user. Now, one of the nice things though in the GUI is that if I just want to go here and type user, and then I'll unlock. If I want to add a user using the GUI, I can specify administrator. However, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead administrator, and we're going to call this a Chuck. Let's keep Chuck Smith. Okay. We'll allow the user to set a password. We set them as an administrator. I'm going to click add. Okay, now I'm going to go in and let's go ahead and load a terminal. And I'm going to switch user Chuck Smith. It says you're required to change your password immediately. So the first time I logged in, I have to put in a password, a new password. And it will not let me put in a simple password. Again, it's better for the administrator, in my opinion, it's better for the administrator to set up your password. However, do you really want to have simple passwords for your password? Wouldn't you want to have a password that's going to be very difficult to hack? I think the answer is yes. So, I don't like it for demonstrating purposes, but it actually is pretty important to put in a good password. Okay, so how do we delete a user from the GUI using the GUI? Well, in this case, I can scroll down. After I unlocked, I can scroll down and click remove user. It asks me if I want to delete the files or keep the files. I'm going to click delete files, and that deletes the home folder. I'm going to do the same thing with Tammy Fields and delete the files. And now my system is clean. It just has my user ID and root. Okay, so that is a demonstration, introduction to user management on your Linux. We went through the commands that we went through here that I'm going to put in the video notes. The commands that we put in here are the same for Red Hat, Fedora, CentOS, and Alma Linux, but they're pretty much the same as Debian Linuxes like Mint and Ubuntu and Pop. The only difference here was how you remove somebody from a group that you've set up. And we're going to be talking more about users and groups as the videos progress, but for right now, hope to see you in our next video.